Hey there, in this video, we're going to use the last of today's gorgeous winter sunlight to discuss the impact of stress and sleep on your menstrual cycle. Out of control stress was a primary reason that I experienced a lot of my period issues, and it's something that I need to continue to diligently work on. So if you're somebody who feels like your stress is just this out of control, always present thing that you've learned to deal with, I totally get that. And so let's define stress. Let's knock it down from that omnipresent shadow into something more tangible. Because we can all agree that stress is like the rush hour traffic on your commute, or a really demanding boss and your kid coloring on the walls when you get home. But events in life can be stressful even when they're joyful as well. So maybe getting married and adjusting to that, a big promotion at work that you've been trying for really hard for a long time, and planning that dream vacation to Europe can all be stressful as well. So better or worse, life events are typically classified as perceived stresses. And we also need to consider the physiological stresses on our body as well. So that's constantly getting poor sleep, chronic infections and diseases, nutritional deficiencies, your body's inflammatory burden, and then exercising beyond your nutrition and restoration. It all dumps into the same cortisol bucket. Whether it be good stress, bad stress, perceived stress, physiological stress, we have to assess it all as a whole. So take a minute and reflect here. Rewind those last couple minutes if you need to, and write down a list of your perceived and physiological stresses, because we need to understand the burden if we're going to address it. So how heavy is your stress? The physiological effects of stress touch nearly every system of the body. So we're going to start with our big focus here, and that's the reproductive system. I want to bring your attention back to how amazingly perceptive your body is. Your brain is constantly surveying the environment and making decisions on whether or not it's safe to become pregnant. So the two biggies it's looking out for: nutrient deficiencies and stress. Check back to that hormonal hierarchy chart on page 16 of my ebook. Insulin and cortisol are tier 1 hormones. So they control everything that follows, including the production of sex hormones. If they aren't happy, no one's happy. So let's say something comes up in your life that's like on and off stressful for a period of a couple weeks, such as longer work hours, type of project that's like a moderate size and importance. One of the ways that stress affects sex hormones is, in the short term, is called the progesterone steal, a hormone named pregnenolone, which is made up of cortisol. And that's why low-fat diets are not great for fertility. Anyway, this pregnenolone is called the mother hormone. So that starts off all the other hormones in the adrenal cascade. And it evolves into these other hormones in metabolic steps. So we want pregnenolone to keep on moving down the pathway and transform into progesterone for all of its beautiful, calming, estrogen balancing effects. But if your brain is demanding cortisol frequently, pregnenolone is going to steer past progesterone and transform into cortisol instead. So now you're left with lower progesterone levels, and you really might be rocked by those nastier effects of estrogen in your cycle without progesterone to balance it out. Let's say your particular stressor lasts for longer period of time. Maybe it's an ongoing financial crisis or an autoimmune flare-up. The stress could affect your ability to ovulate, because just as insufficient food intake signals starvation, higher cortisol levels tell your body that it's not safe for a pregnancy at this moment. Like, are you constantly under attack from warring clans or being uprooted to new settlements in the forest? Oh, no, it's just some work deadlines and like a lot of travel. Either way, shut down ovulation, because we got to look out for number 1 here. So even though you've evolved for modern society, the stress response programming in your brain is still stuck in hunter-gatherer mode. Ovulation, whether you want a pregnancy or not, will be deprioritized and even put on hold until your brain senses that it's safe enough to invest energy and resources into fertility. All right, we're gonna move on to how stress impacts your blood glucose regulation. I'm tripping up on glucose. Bear with me. All right, you might want to pull up page 31 of my ebook because you can reference the graphs while we chat. And on that dysregulated chart, we mentioned how stress and delayed meal timing can put you on the blood sugar roller coaster. I'm coming back for you breakfast skippers and intermittent fasters. So the thing is, when you skip breakfast by more than like an hour or so, your body will resort to releasing cortisol to bring your blood glucose back up. You haven't eaten in probably like 8 hours while you were asleep, so your body's scraping the bottom of the barrel for any available energy. But cortisol has this nifty ability to break glucagon out of its storage facility for emergency situations, like when you don't consume anything more than coffee before 11 a.m. So blood glucose dysregulation is a particularly slippery slope at breakfast, but you can expand that concept to any skipped meal. Did you only eat a few crackers for lunch because you were super busy and you felt fine for a while, but now you're like dragging on the floor and absolutely starving? Yeah, you were probably riding that cortisol wave, and that can only tide you over for so long before you like crash hard. As we discussed in the blood sugar chapter, once you disrupt your insulin response, it is super hard to get back on track for the rest of the day. So if you're particularly sensitive to stress, frequently anxious, constantly exhausted, and or dealing with period issues, oh, did every hand just go up? Pay extra attention here. I don't know you or your life, but I feel pretty confident in assuming that your cortisol levels are too high. Take extra care to send your body those safety signals by eating ample, nutrient-dense meals for blood sugar balance. Go ahead back to pages 36 to 38 if you need some reminders. We also discussed the intersection of the gastrointestinal system with menstrual cycles in the ebook, primarily how proper digestion supports nutrient absorption, and daily bowel movements are essential for managing estrogen levels. So without that steady influx of cycle-supporting nutrients and the constant elimination of estrogen, we could be struggling with painful, irregular, and heavy periods. A professor of biology and neurology, Robert Sapolsky, wrote this really interesting book for science nerds. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the punchline is the zebras don't develop stomach ulcers because even though they routinely are threatened by predators on the savannah, they move on. They respond to their stress and then go about their business munching on prairie grass or whatever zebras do. But humans, we dwell on our stress. We turn it over and over in our minds until it's amplified and then the impact is just really intensified. So stress affects every single step of digestion from the top down. Do you find that you're not hungry when you're trying to deal with something? That is stress suppressing your hunger hormones. Or link it back to our last point, a lack of hunger in the morning is often related to your body automatically just dumping cortisol at that time of day because that's what your habits have trained it to do. So stress also reduces your ability to produce stomach acid. That's how people develop stomach acid or acid reflux symptoms and stomach ulcers. But it severely impairs your digestive capacity too. If your food is passing from the stomach to the small intestine looking more like it did when you chewed it, your small intestine is going to have a really hard time digesting it and pulling those nutrients into the bloodstream. And then if we move on down to the large intestine, stress can create conditions that are more favorable for opportunistic and pathogenic microbes. Yep, the whole balance of your gut microbiome, it can be impacted by stress. So bring that back to our talk on pages 43 to 46 about the importance of a healthy microbiome for consistent estrogen elimination. Stress also acts on gut motility to force elimination of the bowel contents immediately, aka diarrhea, or to hold on to those contents, constipation. So you can't be troubled with your regularly scheduled 7:30 a.m. bathroom trip if you're trying to run for your life. Cortisol it means well. It's trying to look out for you, even if it is really inconvenient. And if you have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, you likely know this all too well because stress is a huge trigger for IBS. Now, the relationship between cortisol becomes a little bit more complex when we look at sleep patterns. To be clear, you need cortisol to be alive. It's this case of too much of a good thing becomes a bad thing. And in a perfect system, cortisol and melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, have this beautiful inverse relationship. Cortisol starts rising around dawn, and melatonin is like gradually falling so that you can wake up. And then in the middle of the day, melatonin is still low, but your cortisol has been creeping up to keep your energy steady. And then as the sun starts going down, cortisol is trending down and melatonin is picking back up so that you can fall asleep again. When you enter the realm of chronic stress and cortisol secretions, this perfectly orchestrated pattern goes all haywire. And here's where people start having difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. Guess who else has receptors for melatonin? The ovaries. So research has found that non-ideal levels of melatonin can affect your follicle development, prevent the surge of luteinizing hormone, and even interrupt ovulation. Of course, we know this becomes a vicious cycle because stress makes it harder for you to sleep, and then you're stressed because you slept like crap. So let's just draw a few more connections here to really put you in some knots. The cortisol release from a night of poor sleep can make your blood sugar crash in the morning even steeper, and or will cause you to crave carb and salt heavy foods. So now all you want is that hash brown and donuts from the coffee shop to double down on your crash. And in addition, your body performs a lot of maintenance functions while you sleep, particularly detoxification and digestion. So poor sleep can interfere with your liver's ability to break down estrogen and your gut's ability to prep a nice little poo for the morning to get rid of those estrogens. Whew, I warned you that was going to be a lot. We didn't even get into how stress incites systemic inflammation, raises your blood pressure, predisposes you to accumulate weight in your midsection, and all the other nasty effects. But I think you get the point. If you're serious about your hormonal health, you also need to be serious about stress management and restorative sleep. So, what are we going to do? Because those stressors are not going to stop rolling in, and we've got to find something to do about them. I want you to be mindful of how full your stress bucket is. And remember that stress management is necessary even when you don't feel classically outwardly stressed. It should be an ongoing practice. So take a few moments to practice mindfulness, meditation, breathing exercises when you can. And when you aren't as busy, build in opportunities for self-care and decompression into your schedule. Make it a priority, just like your meal planning and exercise routine. And maybe those are even stress relieving activities for you.